The road was dark, the kind of Appalachian blackness that swallows headlights whole. It was November 15th, 1966. In a small town called Point Pleasant, West Virginia, two young couples were looking for a thrill. Roger and Linda Scarberry, accompanied by Steve and Mary Millette, cruised past the edge of town, their car nosing into the sprawling derelict grounds of the West Virginia Ordnance Works, a place locals called the TNT area. It was a graveyard of abandoned military industry, a place where shadows played tricks on the mind. But what they saw that night was no trick. Standing near an old power plant was a figure that defied all logic. It was shaped like a man, but impossibly tall, perhaps 7 feet. From its back, immense wings were folded, but it was the eyes that froze the blood in their veins. Two huge, hypnotic, glowing red orbs fixed on them from the darkness. As Roger Scarberry slammed his foot on the accelerator, the creature unfolded its wings and rose into the air, not with the familiar flap of a bird, but with a silent, vertical lift. For miles it pursued them, a winged silhouette against the night sky, easily keeping pace with their car as the speedometer climbed to 100 miles per hour. It didn't flap its wings once. Terrified, they sped back into town, bursting into the sheriff's office with a story so insane it could only be true. They had just become the first witnesses to a terror that would haunt West Virginia and lead to a national tragedy. Within days, the story exploded. A local newspaper reporter, struggling to describe the undescribable, coined a name that would become infamous: the Mothman. What began as one frantic late-night report soon became a deluge. The Mason County Sheriff's Office phones rang off the hook. This wasn't just teenage hysteria. The calls came from some of the community's most credible citizens. A group of volunteer firefighters saw it hovering over a field. A local pilot claimed a massive bird-like creature had swooped at his small plane in midair. The reports were eerily consistent. A tall, gray, winged humanoid with a 10-foot wingspan and piercing, self-illuminated red eyes. The encounters grew more and more unsettling. Families reported their dogs disappearing from their yards, snatched into the night. One woman, driving home, was so terrified when it swooped low over her car that she nearly drove into a ditch, the glowing eyes filling her rearview mirror. The epicenter of these sightings was always the same: the TNT area. This sprawling 8,000-acre complex was a relic of a bygone war, a labyrinth of decaying roads, overgrown fields, and imposing windowless concrete domes used to store munitions during World War II. These igloo-like bunkers, half buried in the earth, gave the landscape an alien, unsettling feel. It was a place haunted by history, now the apparent lair of something far more sinister. The TNT area had transformed from a local curiosity into a roadside relic of pure, unadulterated dread. As the sightings intensified, the story began to shift, twisting from a simple monster hunt into something far stranger, something more akin to a conspiracy. The national press descended on Point Pleasant, but so did others. Among them was John Keel, an author and investigator of the unexplained. Keel wasn't interested in just collecting monster stories. He saw a pattern, a deeper and more disturbing phenomenon unfolding. As he interviewed witnesses, a new element entered the narrative, one that was arguably more frightening than the winged creature itself. People who had seen the Mothman began reporting strange, intimidating visits from unsettling individuals. They were described as odd, olive-skinned men dressed in immaculate, old-fashioned black suits. They drove shiny, brand-new or vintage black Cadillacs and spoke in a strange, monotone, almost robotic cadence. These men in black, or MIBs, seemed to know intimate details about the witnesses' lives, details no stranger could possibly know. They would ask bizarre, nonsensical questions and often issue vague but chilling warnings to stop talking about what they had seen. One witness reported a man who claimed to be from the government but drank Jell-O from a glass as if it were water. Another described MIBs who appeared at her door just moments after she just finished a private phone call about her sighting. The presence of these mysterious figures changed everything. The fear in Point Pleasant was no longer just about a creature in the woods. It was now a paranoid, suffocating atmosphere where phone lines clicked with static, strange cars idled on quiet streets, and people felt they were being watched. The narrative began to pivot. The Mothman no longer seemed like a simple, mindless beast. Its presence felt tied to something else, something bigger. To the terrified residents of Point Pleasant, it felt less like a monster and more like an omen, a silent, red-eyed harbinger of a disaster yet to come. The question was no longer, what was the Mothman, but why was it here? For 13 months, the town of Point Pleasant lived under this shadow of paranoia and dread. The sightings of the winged figure and the harassment from the men in black became an unnerving part of life. Then came the evening of December 15th, 1967, almost exactly 13 months after the Scarberrys and Maletz's terrifying first encounter. It was just before 5 p.m., the peak of rush hour. The Silver Bridge, a vital artery connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, was packed with Christmas shoppers and commuters heading home. The bridge, an I-bar chain suspension design, had stood over the Ohio River for nearly 4 decades. It was a local landmark, a symbol of the town's connection to the world. Without warning, a single critical I-bar in the suspension chain snapped. A sound like a gunshot echoed across the valley, followed by a horrifying, drawn-out groan of twisting metal. In less than a minute, the entire structure buckled and collapsed, plunging dozens of cars and their occupants into the icy, dark waters of the Ohio River below. It was a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. First responders and local volunteers rushed to the scene, but the frigid water and the immense tangled wreckage made rescue efforts nearly impossible. By the time the final count was taken, 46 people were dead. The heart of the community had been ripped out in an instant. In the aftermath of the tragedy, as the town reeled in shock and grief, investigators and journalists noticed something chilling. In the days and weeks following the collapse of the Silver Bridge, the phones at the sheriff's office fell silent. The frantic calls about a 7-foot-tall winged creature with glowing red eyes completely stopped. The sightings of strange black Cadillacs and visits from unnerving men in black vanished as if they had never been there at all. It was as if the Mothman's purpose in Point Pleasant had been fulfilled. The omen had given way to the event it foretold, and the silent messenger had simply disappeared, leaving a shattered community to ask a terrifying question. Had it been a warning all along? So what was the Mothman? What truly terrorized the people of West Virginia for 13 terrifying months? Decades later, the mystery remains, and the theories are as compelling as the story itself. The most common skeptical explanation points to a case of mass misidentification. Ornithologists have suggested that what witnesses saw was a sandhill crane, a large bird with a wingspan of over 7 feet and reddish coloring around its eyes. These cranes are not native to the area, but it's plausible that a displaced individual could have wandered into West Virginia, its unfamiliar shape and startling size amplified by fear and the darkness of the TNT area. But for many locals, the explanation lies deeper in the region's own blood-soaked history. A popular legend ties the Mothman to a Native American curse. In the 18th century, the Shawnee leader Chief Cornstalk and his son were betrayed and murdered by soldiers at Fort Randolph, near the future site of Point Pleasant. As he lay dying, it is said that Cornstalk cursed the land, promising that darkness and tragedy would befall it. To some, the Mothman was the physical manifestation of this centuries-old curse, a vengeful spirit returning to the land where it was wronged. Finally, there is the paranormal theory, the one that John Keel and many of the witnesses came to believe. This theory posits that the Mothman was not a monster or a curse, but a supernatural or even extraterrestrial entity. It wasn't there to cause harm, but to observe and perhaps to warn. In this view, the creature was drawn to the window area of Point Pleasant by the psychic energy of the impending disaster. It was a silent, otherworldly sentinel, trying to communicate a coming doom in the only way it knew how. The tragedy is that its message was misunderstood as a threat. The Mothman has since transcended local folklore, becoming one of America's most enduring and terrifying roadside relics. Do you believe the Mothman was a warning? And what American legend should roadside relics investigate next? Let us know in the comments.